You talked about that time in 21 when the business went tits up, and I think there was two quotes you said. You said, I was ready to fucking kill myself, is what you said on one podcast, talking about that period.
Yeah.
And in another podcast, you said, I was like a phoenix from the ashes and like rose from the ashes. And I think lots of that will give a lot of people listening to this podcast power to realize that when you're fucked on the floor, you can get back up and you can keep going. And they're never going to have to go through what you went through. But just to give some context, like what happened with the sign business and how did it go Pete Tong? And then we'll get on to how you rose from the ashes.
Yeah, I mean, very long story short, went from doing like £1 million a month in sales from my kitchen, entirely bootstrapped, profitable, going great. But probably like a lot of businesses in 2020, because it was in 2020 when it grew. And I was also running my jewellery business at the same time. So I had two businesses collectively doing about 1.2 million a month in revenue when I was 24. So like I hadn't raised a single penny of investment. So going pretty well. Yeah, the long story short, the Neon one went tits up because a supplier ran off with loads of money. They got paid up front, essentially had gone bankrupt in the background because of COVID. And I hadn't done my due diligence and had paid them too much money, and very complicated supply chains. We're making B2B signs, basically. It was all sold online, but, most of our customers were barbershops, like people that wanted custom stuff. So everything was made to order, massive AOV, very complicated product, huge shipping costs. So very quickly went from having like over £1 million in the bank to being insolvent and not being able to pay fucking creditors. And loads of orders disappeared. We're talking 3 million quid's worth of orders that didn't get delivered during peak season Q4 while I had a primetime TV ad campaign slot with ITV because we did a Love Island campaign, a Love Island collaboration campaign. So you kind of have to laugh at it now because it was absurdly big given I was the only shareholder and had a team of people in the Philippines. I just thought it was normal because that's all I'd ever really known. It was like scaling online businesses. But that one just went too big too quick and was built on pretty rocky foundations in hindsight. I didn't have any experience or expertise around me because, I don't know, I've dropped out of uni and just started building shit on my laptop. Very quickly, I would call it a real life MBA and learning how to deal with a business when it goes tits up and bringing in the fucking administrators and doing the process properly and customers getting their money back, ultimately at the expense of my equity and mental health. And then I worked for 6 months with the business that bought that business on a salary for the first time in my life. A nice salary, granted, but a big pay cut from what I was used to, I guess. And then at the end of that period, decided, fuck this, I want to do my own thing again. Sold my equity in that for a bit of money. And then that was September 2021. And for the first time, I had a blank slate. First time since I dropped out of uni, I was like, I don't actually have anything to work on right now. So I started a podcast and started building this brand around that time, basically. But it was incredibly rough, and I'd be lying if I said I was actually over it even now. Like, I still have fucking therapy going over that because there's still a lot that I haven't probably come to peace with, to be honest, because it was financial fuckery, which I think is definitely worse when you don't come from money and you've worked your ass off for 5 years prior to get to the position to even be able to do that in the first place. I didn't have any money given to me ever, do not come from silver spoon background, which, to be completely honest, a lot of founders do. I find particularly in the consumer product space in London, naming no names. But yeah, and then it was also just social media abuse. Like, I was getting death threats for like 3 months. I had to change my phone number. I actually had to move where I lived. It got that bad. Like, I had the Daily Mail at my door threatening to expose me as a fraud, even though the absolute opposite was the truth. I had lost like over £1 million and didn't know how to pay back creditors that I had taken on debts from to try and solve the problems. So yeah, it's pretty rough. And yeah, I definitely still have PTSD now, like about the shit people said to me and made me feel like, and ever since then, I've probably been incredibly paranoid about, the internet and what can go wrong. But it's also given me a very thick skin. And I don't really think anything stresses me that much anymore because it's like, fuck it. I got through 2021 when I was 2.5 stone heavier, broke up with my ex-girlfriend, probably because of the fucking shell of my former self that made me become. And yeah, I don't know. I just think even now, I think there's a lot of talk about entrepreneurship. It's about failure, fall down, get up again. But like, how many people saying that have ever actually experienced a failure? And I'm not talking about you can't get the business off the ground because you're shit at selling stuff. I mean, building a massive business and then having it go wrong. I think that's an actual failure. Not like, oh, I can't sell my fucking crisp brand to Tesco. I've put $3,000 into it. Boo hoo. Like, that's just, you don't know what you're doing. But failure when there's 500,000 Instagram followers, you've got 2 million quid in secured creditors, literally sending you letters, and you've got fucking a dedicated Facebook group with pictures of you as a child in because you've got some nutters on the internet that somehow think that's okay because they didn't get their product in time for Christmas. So yeah, it was a brutal combination of just like online abuse and financial fuckery. And, you know, I'm long past that business now and I've started another one. Everyone tells me how successful it is, but yeah, there's a lot of pain that I've gone through just in entrepreneurship in general, which every founder does, but also, you know, that business going wildly wrong and then having to start again from scratch. And yeah, it wasn't easy to dust myself off from that and go again. And I think my self-confidence has been eternally damaged from that, if I'm honest. But obviously I've managed to get up and do it again. And I think I've got a much better business now, but it's much fucking harder to start D2C brand now than it was even 2-3 years ago. And I can say that because I was doing it 2-3 years ago and I was objectively worse at what I'm doing, but it was way easier and I grew way quicker. Like, you know, a lot of investors I speak to and so on tell me how amazing I'm doing now, but I don't believe them because I was doing, you know, 2-3 times the numbers back when I was 24, which is also something I'll probably never get over until I scale this business to 10 times what I've done in the past. So I've definitely got a massive chip on my shoulder to outdo my previous self, but it's just doing it in a much harder market, which maybe we can get onto. But yeah,
that's 100%. We're gonna explore that, mate. Is how building, you know, D2C brand now versus 2019 was quite the heyday period,
yeah,
as you've said. But what you've said there is super powerful, and I think you're right. Like, failure, not getting his crisp brand into Tesco is not a failure. Like, that's just a knock is all it is. But I think out of everyone I was interviewed, this is a serious failure that has had, like, people are trying to assassinate your character, I think, is what I've garnered.
yeah.
What you said, I was ready to fucking kill myself. Like, what was the worst specific moment during that hell period, and what was the steps you took to be the phoenix from the ashes? Do you know what I mean? Because I think that will help a lot of people who aren't going to go through anything anywhere near as hard as what you've gone through.
Yeah, I think there's like two periods I can remember where I think it was like rock bottom, and they're very different. One of them was when I just knew it was kind of irreparable, and I would ultimately lose the business, and that was probably in like February 2021. And that was also around the time where I was literally had to change my phone number because people were calling me a scammer and all this shit. So it's pretty difficult to deal with, but you just have to fucking get up and deal with it. And then I think the second most difficult period was when I found myself in like October 2021. I actually think I have a video on my phone of me just filming it and being like, this is the worst period of my life, but I'll probably get past it. Whether I'll ever post that video anyway, I don't know. But I'd just broken up with my ex-girlfriend, which, by the way, was never going to work anyway. Like, I don't regret that, but at the time it was fucking miserable because we were living together and so on. So, you know, my business has disappeared. I'm back to square one. I'm like 2.5 stone heavier than I was now or previous because I just became a fat fuck in hindsight because I was just pleasure eating, stress eating. So yeah, but probably that. Day jump out was like 2 times where I just thought, fuck this is really difficult, and especially when you have nothing to work on. But then that's when I ultimately started working on the next thing. And then I got into like running, and that really helped me. I ended up running a really quick marathon, and that became like this good story that I put on my YouTube and so on. Probably need another challenge like that because that definitely helped me get out of a rut. I actually feel like I'm in a bit of a secondary rut right now, to be honest. Maybe we can speak about that. But yeah, I started working on the brand, and I just literally wrote down like what I want to do next. I'm obviously going to start something because that's all I've ever known. Like, I would literally rather jump off a bridge than work for someone else, as dramatic as that sounds, but it's like literally how my mind works because it's all I've ever known. I think any true founder would say that and mean it, not just for dramatic effect. But yeah, then I guess I just fucking did it again, came up with an idea and worked on it and made it reality, which is a lot more work than it sounds saying that. But the fundamentals are, I decided what I was going to do and just started working on it. and it became a real product quite quickly. And then I started growing the business because I guess I knew how to grow a D2C business particularly, because I'd done it 3 times before at that point.